Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Joe, and welcome back to the Dr. Joe Show. By way of background, I'm a licensed psychologist here in sunny Boca Raton, Florida, where it has been my pleasure and my privilege to practice for the past 25 years. And to mark 25 years in practice, I decided that it would be a lot of fun to launch the Dr. Joe Show as a way that I would be able to bring you some extremely interesting folks that I have met along the way over the past 25 years. Now, I know you can see me, but I can't see you. But do me a favor, raise your hand if you remember a movie many, many years ago called, I think it was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. Now, the reason why I'm asking you this is a funny thing happened on my way here to the studio this evening. I was driving along carefully. I don't text while I drive, and the phone did ring, so I punched the button, and it turns out that the gentleman calling me is in fact my guest for this evening, who I expected to be sitting next to me on my left. And for those of you who have tuned in each week, you know I've brought to you some very interesting people. So this gentleman explained what was going on. A situation has come up. Obviously, he can't be here this evening. So my next call then was to Wayne, our producer. And I said, Wayne, I just got a call from so-and-so, and he can't come this evening. You're the producer. What do we do? And he quietly said, Joe, the show must go on. And so I'm going to bring you the Dr. Joe Show this evening, and I thought I would use this time with you to talk about one of my favorite topics over the past 25 years, which is parenting. Because actually I do spend most of my time in the office with children and families. Now, when we think about parenting, one of the first questions that comes up is the notion of, why is it so difficult? And some of you may be parents, some of you may be grandparents, some of you may not have children, some of you may be thinking of someday having children. But the question is, why is it so hard? I mean, we're talking about, firstly, little tiny babies, and yes, they grow up, etc. But why is it so hard to be a parent? Well, my children are now 25 and 22. So I'm sort of on the other end, obviously, of that hands-on parenting situation. But I guess the first thing that I realized when I became a parent 25 years ago, or even 26 years ago, thinking about it, is our children come out without manuals. Now, I often hear comedians late night on TV talking about that, and it gets a good laugh, and maybe you just smiled when I said that, but think about that. Everything that we do in life, no matter what career you can name, comes with a manual. It comes with some kind of instructional booklet. Someone takes you under his or her wing and says, Joe, this is how you do it. But I recall when I became a dad, now this is going back over 25 years ago, there was no manual and there was no training. Now, I thought actually, looking back, that I had been trained, because at that time I was a second grade teacher. And I said to myself, well, if I can stand here teaching second grade for 6 hours a day, I can certainly handle a child, one little baby who's coming along. I didn't remember that those children, those adorable second grade students of mine, left every day at 2 or 3 o'clock, and then I had time to recover. So when I was thinking about this, and being someone who likes to read, I decided that, you know what, I might as well start reading about parenting so that I would be as well prepared as possible. But I quickly found out that, in fact, that was not going to work. Why wasn't that going to work? Because I happened to pick up 2 books. Now, I won't tell you the names of the books. They're still considered standards in the industry. But one book written by this very prolific writer talked about the need to be very exact and very precise and very, very careful. And there was a whole chapter on doing the child's laundry. And this author would have you believe that if you did not separate each item of clothing that the baby was putting on from your laundry, etc., and have 2-3 different soaps, etc., you were going to scar your child for life. So I started reading that, and I started getting very, very nervous. Then on the other hand, I started reading a very famous author, Basically, his contention is if the binky or pacifier, whatever it's called, falls out of your child's mouth and the dog licks it, it's okay, just stick it back in your child's mouth. So at that point, ladies and gentlemen, I decided that reading was just going to make me a little bit more nuts. I was already a little bit nervous, so I decided, well, I don't think that I was going to read anything that was going to help me. But in thinking about why parenting's so hard, let me ask you if this has ever happened to you. Let's say you not only work at home raising children, let's say you also have a job out there, out in the office, somewhere out in the universe. Has this ever happened to you? You could be having a wonderful day at your office, in the field. You're solving problems, you're coordinating efforts, you're doing whatever you do, you're signing documents, you're creating contracts, you're having a great day at the office, and then you drive home. And back in the day when my kids were little, it was as if on the ceiling, I'd pull in the garage or open the garage and walking through the door, and it was if there was a little device, like probably looked in my imagination like a smoke alarm. But in other words, I could have a great day in the office and feel tremendously productive, then walk into the house, and it was as if 3/4 of my IQ was sucked out of my brain. And in 2 seconds, I'm like, I can't even handle my 3-year-old who wants to play right away. Or when I had 2 children, and we'll talk about sibling issues a little bit later on the show this evening, I couldn't handle it. So you start to get a sense that this parenting thing, which is so vital and so important, is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And one more example comes up about the parenting thing, and maybe you're still going through this, but have you ever had this experience? Have you ever had this experience where, and I don't know if you sleep on your stomach or your back, but I know I sleep on my side, so I would be sleeping. So let me pretend to go to sleep. So here I am sleeping in bed. I have 1 or 2 children at the time. So again, let me set the stage. I'm sleeping in bed, and have you ever had the thought that even though your eyes are closed, that there's something right here? It's like a presence. And as you lie there, realizing there's something standing or right in front of you, you're not sure if it's a person from a UFO. You don't know if it's someone broken into your house. Or you say to yourself, uh-oh, if I open my eyes, is that my 5-year-old? And then you quickly think, you know what, I think I would rather have a person from a spaceship than my 5-year-old. Daddy, I can't sleep. Because because you've been doing this before, up goes your 5-year-old, you walk him or her back to bed, you put him down, you go back to sleep. In fact, you've made this trek back and forth so many times between your bed and your child's bedroom that you don't even you could do it with your eyes closed because your footprints are worn down in the rug. And so it is my contention that while parenting is the be-all and end-all, and it's one of the most critical things for those of us who choose to be parents, it is also one of the most difficult things that we're ever going to do. So let's talk about what we can do to make it easier. Now, I don't know if you play golf. I live in Florida. 6 years ago, I had this crazy idea to start to play golf, and I like taking lessons, and I'm out there taking lessons, and I hit the ball, and I whack a house. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's ever done this. And I look up at the pro, and I said, I can't believe I just swung and whacked and hit this house. Luckily, I didn't hear the sound of broken glass. And this very benevolent gentleman, who was sort of a golf pro and a wise old sage rolled into one, kindly looked at me and said, Joe, that ball can only do what you told it to do. In other words, you hit that ball perfectly to swing it over and whack that house. So I was thinking about that, and in fact I think about that a lot when I think about the kids and families and this whole parenting thing that we're talking about, because your children, like that golf ball, and yes, your children are not inanimate objects, but just like that golf ball sitting there waiting to find out what it's going to do, you are setting the tone for your children. Your children are going to listen to you. They're going to model what you do. So as my friend Dr. Winter says, the best kind of parent you can be, the best thing that you can do is to be the kind of person that you want to be. And I thank her because she shared with me that about a year ago, and it has stuck in my brain. So let's talk about parenting. Let's not talk about golf. A couple weeks from now, I have a very famous golf instructor pro coming on the show. But when I mention golf, the reason why I mention it, I was told in golf, less is more. It's the same with parenting. Less is more. Let's talk about limit setting. Why is limit setting so important? In fact, if you're a new parent, one of the best things that I can tell you to do is simply stand in front of a mirror and put your tongue behind your front teeth and practice saying no. And say it with confidence. Because if you don't set limits, let's look at the other side. If you don't set limits for your child, he's going to grow up fearful. Let's face it, your kids know what they're doing. They know when they're doing something right. They know when they're doing something wrong. And the child who doesn't have limits is going to start to panic. Now, what's one of the biggest problems with limit setting? We are fearful. You're 20, you're 30, you're 40, you're 50 years old. We become fearful of how our children are going to react. What if your child gets mad at you? What if your child throws a temper tantrum? What if your child throws a temper tantrum out in public? Have you ever been in that situation? I mean, you've gone shopping at Publix or wherever you shop with your child, and he or she decides that they don't like the fact that you said, no, we're not having 19 sugary things in the cart, and he's lying on the floor doing the breaststroke, screaming out loud in front of everybody. For me, as a child psychologist, that was always like an out-of-body experience. So what do? You can calm down, you can reason with your child, you can give in and put that sugary snack or whatever right back in the cart, which I would ask you never to do, or you can do what I would do. I would drop back, hey, whose kid is this? Whose child is this? Now, for me as a child psychologist, my children innately knew when to flip out in public, usually right after I said hello to a family that I had seen that Friday afternoon. Now it's Saturday, and my kids are going nuts. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have to set limits. Whether you're parenting by yourself, whether you're parenting with a partner, a spouse, you have to be clear. You have to be the boss. You have to be firm. You have to be structured. Because if you don't set the tone, if you're not confident and you don't say no or not now, everything is going to break loose. Now let's look. There are so many examples. Let's talk about the family bed, because and that always comes up in parenting discussions. If I look anecdotally at the last 100 families I've seen that have talked about the fact that they have a family bed, in other words, everyone is sleeping in the same bed. And I ask those 100 families, how many of you are doing this by design because you believe in the family bed concept? Maybe 3 out of 100 will say that's the reason why. Where have these other 97 families come to this issue with the family bed? Because the limit wasn't set. Limit setting is crucial. Children have to hear the word no. They have to learn to delay gratification. And if they don't learn that when they're young, then you're setting up to have significant problems when they go off to school to socialize, etc. Let's talk about responsibility. Obviously, as parents or grandparents raising or helping to raise children, we all want our children to grow up and be responsible. When can you start to teach responsibility? When they're this big, when they're little. What's the easiest way to start? Cleaning up. Cleaning up toys, cleaning up materials. When they're young. Now, I don't care when you start to help your children clean up. If you sing a cleaning up song, I don't remember that when I was a kid there were songs about clean up, and I'm not going to sing this. The producer's going, don't sing, don't sing. I sing him behind the camera. Joe, okay, so we're not going to sing the popular cleaning up song, but cleaning up is such a great way to start because it imparts responsibility. Now, I'm all for a mess. If you're in my office and we're playing with blocks, I dump that big thing over. I like a mess. But my office is cleaned up every hour, and it looks pretty near perfect each time. So start when your children are young in teaching responsibility, because that's going to help them. A mess is fine, but a mess becomes overwhelming. So take out something and play, put it away, take out material 2, take out material 3, etc. And as we're on the topic of toys, remember that expression, less is more? Less is more. Every time your child says, I'm bored, there's nothing to do, the reality is he or she is probably overwhelmed because of the fact that there's 9 million choices. You've emptied the stores. And if your house now is overwhelmed with kids' stuff, do everybody a favor, pack some up and just move it away. So we have to start teaching about responsibility. Let's talk about sibling rivalry. It's natural, it happens, it's to be expected. Now again, if you're raising children and you've got more, if you have one child and then there's going to be a second child in the family, the way that you introduce that to your son or daughter depends obviously on his or her age and where they are sort of intellectually. But for goodness sakes, don't say to child number 1 something that sounds like, oh, honey, listen, Mom and I have some very exciting news, whether a mother is carrying a child, whether there's a surrogate, whether you're adopting a child, it's all the same. However, don't say to your child, oh, honey, we're having so much fun with you, we've got such exciting news, we're bringing someone else into the family, because your child has either A, stopped listening because this is one more run-on sentence by Mom or Dad, or they're thinking, hey, what's wrong with me? Think about it. If you're the prince, why do you want to share this with a princess? So whatever you say, keep it real, keep it to the point, because again, when you introduce that second child or a third child, things change. The dynamic energy in your house is going to change, and you, if you're doing this by yourself, or you and your spouse, or you and your partner, you're going to get tired, you're going to get cranky, you're going to get irritable. Things change. So for goodness sake, for the sake of that first child, or the children who are already there, don't say, oh, this is the greatest thing in the world. Underplay it. Let the children come to their conclusions. Jealousy's going to happen, comparisons happen, but by the time you have that second child, you're already feeling better because you realize you can take off his or her undershirt without ripping off their arm, which I realized by the time my son came along, I was a little bit more relaxed about helping him get dressed. Let's talk about consequences. Consequences for children's behavior, whether they're doing something positive or whether they're doing something negative, is important. And it starts early. And I don't care whether you're into the timeout thing or you're taking toys away. Find a system that works for you. But while we're on the notion of timeout, and I don't know who invented it, probably some psychologist looking to write a book or something, let's just think about timeout, because timeout comes up in my office quite frequently, thinking about timing. If you're going to have a timeout, remember it has to be long enough that it makes an impact. Let's think about it. Punishment only works if it is aversive. A child has to not enjoy the consequence that you've bestowed based on his or her behavior. So this notion that a 2-year-old, 2 minutes, please, I can hold well, not really, but I probably could hold my breath for a minute. So telling me to sit down for a minute is not going to do anything. So if you're going to use timeout, for example, make the time significant enough that your child doesn't want to be there. So let's face it, folks, whether you're setting consequences on a 4-year-old or your 17-year-old, let's talk about what would a 17-year-old do or a 16-year-old do that would need a consequence. How about not coming home on time? How about not following his or her curfew? And again, we're shooting this in the evening here in South Florida, where you get a learner's permit at 15 and you get a license at 16. Where I'm from in Boston, it's 16 and then 17. But there's a law in Florida that says if you're a new driver, you have to be home at 11 o'clock. And I know many folks don't adhere to this, which blows my mind. But let's say your child comes home 20 minutes after curfew, driving a car. What's the consequence? And if you're going to issue a consequence like you're not driving this weekend, which is going to hit your child hard, then stick with it. One of the worst things that we can do as parents is just threaten. Well, if you do this again, because let's face it, ask Joey, the child, does your mom or dad ever follow through what they're saying? Oh, no, no, no. Or they wear you down. Or maybe your child knows, let's say your child is playing Xbox and you want him or her to come to dinner on time because you've had the ability to finally make dinner despite how hard you've been working all day. Now you've got a meal on the table and your son is having a great time and your daughter with Xbox. Is it not reasonable for you to say, Joey, it's time for dinner, please close it down? Now, how many times do you want to say that before your child shows up? Well, maybe once, maybe a second time. But if your child knows that typically what's going to happen is you're going to start out here, Joey, it's time for dinner, Joey, 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 and end up screaming, he or she knows they've got 10 more minutes. Maybe it would be more effective to either tell your child it's time for dinner, and if he or she doesn't show up, they don't eat. I hope that didn't sound barbaric to you. Or maybe it makes more sense. I mean, think about how many parents get speeding tickets on the way to school because their child was doing something. Oh, I just have to save it. I just have to save it. I just have to save it. Now it's taken 12 minutes to save that thing, and you're running late to school. Maybe it makes more sense to walk in and shut that thing off. And I don't think that's being harsh. I think that's being the boss. And it shows your child that you are in command. And folks, that is imperative. It is imperative that you are in command. And by the way, why are we playing all of these games early in the morning when maybe we could be sitting and talking? Talking. Quality time. Who invented this notion of quality time? Again, probably some psychologist out in California, and I guess I'm going to hear from all of my colleagues out in California. But what is this notion of quality time? It's as if when you're with your child, you're thinking everything you do has to be interactive and based on learning, and it has to, I don't know what it has to do, but that is crazy. Now, let me grab a piece of paper. There's a simple test to see if you have, quote, I call it quality time disease. So let me hold this up, and let's see if we can catch this on the camera. Okay, perfect. If this is your house or your apartment or your condo, this is a test for quality time. And this is you driving, and you drive over here, and then you drive over here, and then you drive over here. And if you're driving 15, 20, 25,000 miles a year, and you never, for example, if it's Boca Raton, Florida, where I'm currently residing and practicing, and you're not leaving the city limits, and this is your child going from one activity, folks, you've got quality time disease. Let's face it, not everything has to have a piece of learning. What happened to simply sitting and talking? Ladies and gentlemen, you can have a quality time, a good experience with your son or daughter when she's 4 years old, sorting the laundry. Now, if you're a little anal, you can say, oh, honey, look at this towel. We can fold this in half, and now we have 2 pieces, so tomorrow when you go to preschool, you can tell Miss Linda we learned about fractions. Please don't do that. Just fold the towel. But in other words, ladies and gentlemen, anything that you want to do with your child, it can be a quality experience as long as you're there and you're in the moment. And for goodness sakes, put your phone, where's my phone? Put your phone down. I hear so often from children, Dr. Joe, could you please tell my mom or dad to put their phone down. Now, it's interesting. Months ago, whenever it came out, the movie about Facebook, thought it was a very interesting movie. When the lights came on, I looked around, and I would say 95% of the people in that audience were walking down the stairs out of that movie looking down. Bill Maher does a very funny bit about how we are now a generation of people looking down. Connect with your child. Wait till he or she is in bed. That's quality time. Speaking of bed, before we run out of time, to be a psychologist, obviously, you have to do a dissertation. I did mine. It was about this fat. It was like a big book report. I got it done. But if I had to do another dissertation, what I would really like to look at, talking about children, because a lot of things happen, especially if you're raising children with someone else, with a partner, with a wife, with a spouse, whatever. So what I would like to look at is I would like to look at the interaction of intimacy, right, which is very, very important. That's intimacy. And I would like to study, and I forget, one of these is called the X and one of these is called the Y, the abscissa or something, I forget. But I would like to study what happens as the number of children increase. So we'll put 1, 2, 3, 4. As the number of children increase, what happens to the occurrence of intimacy? As the number of children goes up, do we become more intimate with that special someone? Does it level out? Or in many cases, does it go down like that? And that's something I always like to talk about with parents, because folks, when you're raising children, you are working very, very hard. And whether or not you are a stay-at-home mom or dad, which means you are busting your butt every day and not getting that big paycheck. And interestingly enough, the other day I looked at a mom in the office. Two lovely children were discussing stuff, so I simply said to her, you know what, if you were getting paid to do this, what would be your minimum required starting salary? And she did not even bat an eye. She said 1 million plus benefits. And I said to myself, she's right. I mean, look at how important this is. So whether or not you're a stay-at-home parent, or whether or not you're also holding down 1 or 2 or 3 careers at the same time, think about being there for your child. And again, not to just talk about sex all evening, which obviously would be a great topic. If intimacy is part of your life, you have to protect it. I know that's hard. I recall it is hard. So, what do I want you to think about? One, I want you to think about hanging with us this evening. Again, if you missed the beginning of the show, I shared that my guest this evening, something came up, couldn't make it, and Wayne, the producer, said, Joe, Joe, may be new to television, but I've been doing this forever, and there's an old adage, the show must go on. So hopefully the show has gone on. The other adage from golf, less is more. Think about what happens when you stand over that golf ball and you are relaxed. Not that this happens to me yet, but you are relaxed and you are confident and you are looking down that fairway and you can see that shot in your mind's eye. That's the same as parenting. Parent with conviction. Parent with firmness. Parent from your gut. Stop reading every book that comes out on the market. Go with your instinct, and you are going to do a fantastic job. Folks, thanks for hanging in with me this evening. Next week, talk about children. If you don't know who Laurie Scott is, Laurie Scott, if you have not heard about the Achievables, go online, Google it, because next week, Laurie Scott is going to be sitting here. She's going to bring, here's Laurie. Hi, Joe, how are you? Laurie's going to be here. She's going to share with you this incredible program that she launched. I can't wait to share her story with you. Laurie Scott, The Achievables. Again, I'm Dr. Joe. You've been watching The Dr. Joe Show. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in.